Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Korean Atlanta Mentorship. And in this video, I want to talk about why limitations are actually a good thing for human society. And culture is actually derived from limitations rather than knowing how to live in abundance. In fact, I really think that one of the reasons why we're experiencing cultural degeneracy and why so many countries are kind of like a blur nowadays. Like there's no uniqueness among different people that much anymore. Again, I know there are nuances, right? But just talking about society as a whole. Why there's not a lot of uniqueness among different groups of people is because we live in a society of abundance and culture in general, whether it's the food that you eat, your thoughts, patterns, and traditions, all are, I think, in my opinion, a response to what your limitations are, right? And there was a study back in the day, I forgot what it was called, where they had a mouse utopia and they give all their mouses or rats everything that they wanted. And then within a few generations, I forgot how many generations, they bred themselves out to existence, right? They became extinct. I don't know if extinct is the right word, but it's kind of a shocking experiment about how animals or human beings in general just were not meant to live in a society of abundance. In fact, probably one of the easiest way to destroy your enemies is let them win the lottery, right? A lot of lot of research out there that shows that winning the lottery is probably one of the worst things that can happen to your life, and that's because you enter in a world of scarcity, limitations, which we were designed to live in, and then you give someone everything in the world, and if they don't psychologically know how to handle that or just be a little bit prepared, then their life will probably be destroyed. It's like kind of giving somebody a big fat credit card and they've never dealt with credit in their life, or giving somebody a huge inheritance rather than just kind of kind of like through a trust, giving them that money over time, right? So my point is that human beings, it's actually a good thing to live in a world of limitations, because that's when our way of life and culture develops, right? So, and this is true in other things too. And this was actually inspired by a video that I was watching on a channel called Modern Vintage Gamer. And then you could kind of see the thumbnail over here, why old games were better, right? But then here, the title is why the limitations of the N64 and PS1 mattered. So these were video game systems back in the 90s. And I thought that was really interesting because I remember growing up and playing video games, and each new video game console back when I was a kid always seemed to have its own unique identity and style when it came to the video game. So, for example, games in the Sega Genesis era had a unique sound and different types of graphics than the Super Nintendo, and that's because the video game developers developed games in response a certain uniqueness of games in response to those limitations. And I clearly remember when I was a kid that there were things like in arcade culture, because the fact that you put in a coin and if you win you get to stay, if you lose you get kicked out, that had its own culture and feel as to the type of video game that was made, as well as the demographic that liked to play the game, right? Whereas nowadays, the limitations are almost kind of fake with the microtransactions, and you could pretty much download. I mean, go on do a back end download of pirate any game that you want, and you really never have to pay for it, right? Like you don't have to pay for anything, and so the reason I talk about this is because limitations are what creates your identity. Because human beings, we are actually much more creative when we're in an environment of limitations rather than abundance, right? Like definitely not gonna. It's like if I had to, uh, choose the best environment for you, it would be the one where you were not given everything, right? Maybe you're given a few tools, but not the one where you're given everything. The one where you're given everything is going to be a world where you're given the best information, you do absolutely nothing with it, aka the internet, right? And you have access to all these contacts, but you never contact any one of them. Again, a cell phone, right? Like there's so many things wrong with the world of abundance. And again, it doesn't mean that video games these days are completely bad, right? I like playing, especially the Batman games. I think they're really fun, but they don't tend to have a unique identity nowadays compared to back then. And this is the same true with countries as well. Like I'm pretty sure that almost every modern nation is a fast food loving nation, right? Like I was watching this article or this I forget it was like a video about how American fast food conquered France, right? France. In fact, let's just kind of take a look at this. American fast food and the French, right? So, American fast food companies are doubling up on the French market as the country's appetite for brands like McDonald's, Five Guys, KFC, and Burger King has grown rapidly in the past decade, right? Again, it's like a kind of like a disappearance of culture, and culture, in my opinion, is a response to a limited environment, right? So now every culture and country is essentially becoming the same. I mean, where do you think American individualism came from, right? Like American individualism came from a response to a limited environment. If you're going from east to west in a frontier society, you basically have to have, let's say, a rugged individualistic personality in order to survive that. That's where I think American individualism comes from, right? Whereas certain other societies, in fact, most societies have been collectivist, right? Most societies in general are collectivist. And so, in order to survive in those societies, you want to be as same as much as possible compared to your next buddy, and that's kind of like how you survive, right? So, let me go back here. So, kind of to reiterate my point, your limits are your strength, and they create your culture, right? So, with video games, as you get to each successive generation, you have less and less of an identity, and this is why in this current age with the PlayStation 5, Xbox One, and the PC, they all are just kind of a big blur. At least to me, they are, and this is why I don't buy any more video game consoles anymore. I mean, the only difference between those three is just the outside branding and box, in my opinion. But I buy the PC just because that's essentially what all those video game systems are, and because they're all have so much. They don't have any more limitations. Like all three systems are the same. You don't have you have a lack of distinct sound of graphics, right? Whereas like back in the day, you say, "Oh, that's a Nintendo game. Oh, that's a Super Nintendo game," and then, "Oh, that's a PlayStation," because they all had their own limitations, and limits are actually a good thing, right? I mean, think about how like all these food dishes got developed. Well, traditionally, I mean, why do you think like certain areas they use a lot of corn because that's probably all they had, right? I'm assuming that in Mexico, they had an abundance of corn, which is why almost everything that you eat in Mexico is made with corn, right? Whereas like you go to the Hispanic cultures below Mexico, right? They probably don't have that abundance of corn, and that's yeah. You see what I'm saying? So same thing with like Asian countries, probably that they were limited to maybe like rice and all that, and so they know how to use rice better, right? Or dishes with rice better, and that's what I'm saying that um, limits are not a bad thing, or should they be seen as a bad thing? You give a person everything they want, they don't know how to handle a process that. This is why a lot of people struggle financially, is because what happens in their society when we turn 18 is that, hey, we just give you a lot of credit and student loans and then go crazy, and then we wonder like why they can't handle themselves, right? Like why can they not handle themselves? Because we're not limiting their environment of what they can do, right? We're not letting them kind of develop their skills and progress naturally. It's just like, hey, here's a bunch of student loans, go crazy, and then wonder why they go crazy, right? And another thing that I feel like ruined our generation is, this is especially true when I was a kid, of adults trying to like tell me like, what do you want to do with your life? You can be anything you want. and that probably ruined us too. I mean, if you take a look at societal sentiment, millennials and below are pretty much a failed generation. Like, are they not? They're the generation where the culture just kind of was at a standstill, and the reason why the culture was at a standstill or degenerated is because there was no limits. Parents are like, you can be whatever you want, rather than, hey, be a little bit realistic, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, you have only one or two options in your life: be a factory worker or go to office, right? Whereas, our generations, you could be anything that you want, anything, and then that probably ruined us, right? So, all right. Well, this is Korean Atlanta Mentorship. Just another video about society and culture, and you don't want to you don't want to win the lottery. That's probably the message of the video. All right. Well, have a great day, everybody, and we will speak next time.